We all remember how Rishi Sunak stood in the London rain like a wet poodle, and rarely has an image made the situation of a politician as clear as that of the Prime Minister in what situation he is. The Conservative head of government announced the parliamentary elections for July 4th in strong words, but if he does not manage to turn public opinion around within weeks, his next appearance in front of the famous Black Door in Downing Street will probably be his last as Prime Minister, to admit defeat. Sunak's Conservatives are around 20 percentage points behind the Labour Party in the polls. Unless an even greater miracle occurs, opposition leader Keir Starmer will move into Downing Street on July 5th as the first Labour Prime Minister in 14 years, and 100 years after the first Labour head of government in British history. Labour's lead is mainly due to the enormous anger at the Conservatives. Many people do not yet know what the party stands for. Starmer recently presented a 6-point emergency program. I mentioned that yesterday already. He wants to ensure economic stability, reduce waiting times in the NHS, create a new command structure for border protection, establish a national energy company, take action against antisocial behavior, and employ 6,500 new teachers. And Starmer promises the British a change. And according to commentators, many voters are counting on Labour to bring a new tone to the government, and the chaos of recent years with 3 prime ministers, frequent scandals and constant changes of ministers, and they hope that this will finally come to an end. Sir Keir Starmer's strategy is to reassure the public that the biggest risk this time is keeping a discredited government in office, is what political scientist Mark Garnett from Lancaster University told the German press agency. Starmer is considered to be boring, but that is exactly what many Britons longed for, it is often said. Labour were often in the shadow of the Conservatives. Starmer would be only the 7th Labour Prime Minister in history. Born out of the workers' movement, the Labour Party united left-wing movements when it was founded in 1900. From the beginning, it has been closely linked to the trade unions, which still have a lot of influence today. A comparison with German politics here is not easy. Labour does not have close ties to our German Social Democrats, for example. But because of the British electoral system, in which only the candidate with the most votes wins in each constituency, regardless of the lead, both major popular parties cover a broad spectrum. Labour also has positions that would be more likely to be attributed to our Germans' left, the Greens, and sometimes the Liberals. But former lawyer Starmer has been the leader of His Majesty's most loyal opposition since April 2020, as the head of the largest opposition party in the British House of Commons is traditionally called. He took over Labour from Jeremy Corbyn, who lost the 2019 election by a landslide to then Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Starmer has led the party back to the political centre from Corbyn's very left-wing positions. At first, however, things did not go well. After a defeat in a by-election to the British Parliament in the North East English Labour stronghold of Hartlepool in May 21, Starmer wanted to quit, as he recently admitted. But many scandals under the Conservative Prime Ministers Johnson and Truss brought him new support. And most recently, Starmer has also adopted moderate Conservative positions, using the space left to him by the Tories' right-wing course. The former head of the CPS, like his competitor Sunak, is not considered a rousing speaker. But many people appreciate the father of 2 teenage children for his down-to-earth nature, his calmness and his sensitivity. In his private life, Sir Keir, as he has been able to call himself for several years, is a big fan of the London Premier League football team Arsenal, and also plays football with his friends as often as possible. Starmer repeatedly stresses that he completely revamped Labour. While anti-Semitic accusations were made against the party under Corbyn, which traditionally has strong sympathies with the Palestinian movement, Starmer has taken a clear stance against anti-Israel comments. He has clearly denounced the terror of the Islamist Hamas against Israel. However, there are still MPs or candidates who make derogatory comments about Israel. In one such case, at the beginning of February, Labour stopped supporting its original candidate in the parliamentary by-election in Rochdale near Manchester, even though it was no longer allowed to name a replacement candidate. Shortly afterwards, a survey showed that around 40% of people believed that the party was still struggling with anti-Jewish prejudices. In Corbyn's shadow cabinet, Starmer served as his party's Brexit spokesman. And in contrast to the party leader at the time, he campaigned for a second referendum to reverse Brexit. But he has now made it clear that he sees no way back into the EU. He does want to get closer to the community again, and such hopes are regularly heard from the EU as well. But Starmer has so far rejected rejoining at least the EU customs union or the single market. And commentators point out that the Labour leader is afraid of losing important votes in the traditionally EU-critical north of England. The Conservative Party had already suffered a heavy defeat in the local elections in England and Wales at the beginning of May now. And according to polls, the Tories are a good 20% behind the Labour Party nationwide, while in the last general election at the end of 2019, it was almost the other way around. Due to the majority voting system in Great Britain, you remember first past the post, Labour could, according to projections, win around 400 of the 650 House of Commons seats with around 45% of the vote and thus govern alone. The Liberal Democrats could not benefit from the weakness of the Conservatives. Reform UK, the former Brexit party, will probably gain significantly in votes, but hardly in parliamentary seats. The Nationalists, especially in Scotland, are likely to lose, and the decision to hold early voting is not undisputed within the Conservative Party. However, the chances of a U-turn in the second half of the year are also not particularly high. In purely economic terms, the signs are pointing to improvement. In the first quarter, gross domestic product grew strongly by 0.6% compared to the previous period after two declines. The indicators would also point to growth for the following periods, although probably not as dynamically. The unemployment rate is quite low despite the previous economic weakness, even if the rate has risen slightly. In April, inflation fell to just 2.3%, and this also meant that the misery index, the sum of inflation and the unemployment rate, fell back to a tolerable level. Core inflation, on the other hand, remained quite high at 3.9%, so that the Bank of England is unlikely to make the first interest rate cut in June, probably later. Perhaps the economic improvement will bring the Conservatives a few more votes. The mood in the country could also be a little better at the beginning of July, as the English national team will not have been eliminated from the European Football Championship by then. But the election defeat will not prevent this. The Tories have been in power since 2010 and have used up 5 prime ministers, with Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss and now Sunak. There was chaos, scandals, parties during the corona lockdown, disputes and a Brexit that could not be considered a success story. Even with the planned deportations of asylum seekers to Rwanda, the government hardly scored any points. Voters are probably fed up with the Conservatives, especially since Labour, unlike 2019 under Jeremy Corbyn, is currently not a left-wing boogeyman. Under Keir Starmer, the new Prime Minister, well, the party appears moderate. And it's focusing on economic stability, healthy public finances, internal and external security, more money for the health system, and some public investments. Brexit is not being called into question, and Starmer has already scaled back the climate protection program. Taxes should at the most be increased for rich foreigners. The reality may be different, but Labour's election manifesto does not seem frightening this time. The financial markets therefore reacted quite relaxed to the news. The now shorter period of uncertainty before the elections may even be a positive thing for the markets. And for the British pound, the policy of the Bank of England is more relevant anyway than some campaigns. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.